Good afternoon, members of the board, and welcome to today's meeting. Today we'll be going over and analysing the failed merger between Daimler-Benz and Chrysler in order to prevent our future mergers from failing. So to start off with, I'll just give you a bit of an overview of exactly what went on with the merger, a bit of background information, then we'll go into exactly why that happened. So Daimler-Benz bought Chrysler for $36 billion back in 1998. It's designed to be a merger, not a hostile takeover. So Daimler-Benz ended up purchasing 92% of Chrysler to have the majority sharehold. Now, why exactly did we do this? Why did we go and merge with Chrysler, such a very different company to Daimler-Benz? This was to create a premium brand and a cheaper brand to combat to combat the likes of the Toyota-Lexus relationship. The idea being we'd have a luxury brand in Mercedes and a not so luxury brand focused on the lower end of the market with Chrysler. So in the end, we'd end up with a complete total market domination, being able to cater to obviously the high-end executives right down to first-time car buyers. So a real complete market offering there. It was also to do with cheaper manufacturing and design facilities. So the idea being we could then combine the two manufacturing facilities together to create a much cheaper cost of manufacture. We also wanted to create modular cars in the sense that the cars we designed could just have a different bodywork. We could be a Mercedes and then just change the bodywork and interior around, and it would also then be a Chrysler. A good example of this would be the Mercedes SLK. It was mechanically exactly the same as a Chrysler Crossfire. Alright, so let's move on to exactly why this merger failed. So there's three distinct reasons why this merger failed. First one being differences in corporate cultures and values. So there were two separate management teams from two separate companies, obviously, when things came together. And a big downfall was the fact that it remained two management teams. It didn't combine to create one. One team was in Stuttgart, obviously Daimler-Benz, Mercedes-Benz. Massively hierarchical, everything was very precise, and that was the German way of doing things. Obviously, there was another management team for Chrysler in Detroit, and it was much more team-orientated. There was much less of a hierarchy. It was much more, as a group, they would come up with ideas. It was much more American than German. And I think the cultural differences between German society and American society are just so immense that to have two separate management systems is just unrealistic, and was one of the detrimental reasons to why the merger failed. Secondly, there was also a lack of coordination between the two companies. So as I said, there was meant to be input of modular design so that cars could be both a Mercedes and a Chrysler made in the same facility. Now, it took 4 years, so it was 2002, before a single car rolled off of a production line that was modular and ready to roll for both situations. So it was Mercedes SLK and the Chrysler Crossfire. So the Chrysler was an absolute massive flop. It made no money, it made big losses for Chrysler, whereas the Mercedes SLK was one of the most successful ever models. Now, why is that? Because Mercedes-Benz know how to sell a sports car. They know how to sell a luxury item. Chrysler, they're not known for that. They're known for a very different audience. They know how to sell a lot of something that's very cheap, not how to sell a premium product. So let's finally move on to the third and final point. So there's severe lack of trust between employees. So it was regularly documented that between the German designers and the American designers, there was very little trust between the two. They weren't willing to work together, they didn't like sharing ideas, and because of this, there was a 4-year period between the design and final implementation of the product. They ended up with a car that essentially had a Mercedes engine and a Mercedes chassis. However, Chrysler still managed to completely redesign part of the car, which meant that over half the car was still designed only by Chrysler, which meant that even though it was designed as a modular system, it wasn't truly modular, and this was a massive, massive fail and just showed the level of distrust between the company. So let's look at the reasons exactly why the merger ended up splitting. So in 2006, Chrysler records a $1.5 billion loss, lays off 13,000 staff, and closes down one of its manufacturing facilities. Later that year, they sold it to a Cerberus holding company for $6 billion. That's a $30 billion loss over the course of just under 10 years. Now, why exactly was this the case? Well, Chrysler quoted the fact that rising fuel prices meant that no one had wanted to buy their Chrysler trucks and big vehicles in which they were originally known for. Realistically, I think it's clear that it was to do with cultural differences between such a company such as Daimler-Benz or Mercedes and that of Chrysler, an American company and a very German company with very, very different ideas of how to run a car company. I think at the end it cost a lot of money, and we realistically have to have a very close look at the cultures of future mergers to make sure they're successful. So please, I really do urge you to do so.